So it transpires that 74,000 people have been wrongfully convicted, or rather incorrectly convicted, of, quotes, fare dodging on the railways. So how has that come about? I'm going to explain that, and it also gives me an opportunity to ramble about something called the single justice procedure. And this is actually something that is very important to just regular people, because if you're involved in any sort of traffic matters or minor offences like that, it's a single justice procedure that will be employed, and it's fairly fair to say there's a lot of reasons to criticise it. So first of all, what's actually happened with the fare dodging? Basically, a bunch of people found on the railways, supposedly without tickets or without the right travel pass, all that sort of thing. They were dealt with under the single justice procedure, because the legislation actually says that railway offences can be dealt with by the single justice procedure. The problem was that all these people were done under the regulations of the Railways Act of 1898 or 1889. And rather weirdly, despite what that actually says, that actually isn't a railway offence. So it's a complete nullity. There were 6 test cases where this actually came to light, because there are 7 railway companies involved who have all done the same thing. Also, some people were prosecuted for offences that can actually carry a prison sentence. And again, they can't be dealt with by the single justice procedure. So the prosecutors went along to court and said, hey, judge, you can use something called the slip rule to rectify all this and just deal with it afresh. But the judge correctly pointed out, he said, the slip rule is just there for when there's a technical error that doesn't really go to the heart of justice. It's just for correcting minor things, like I impose an incorrect penalty or something like that, or I fine somebody, on a level 3 fine when it's only a level 4 offence or something like that, or whichever way they go around. It's like the DEFCON 1 to 5 thing, I always get that mixed up too. Just to give you an example of the slip rule and how it operates, I was once involved in a case where we were dealing with a confiscation order on the back of a big conspiracy. Now, as it happened, in terms of the conspiracy, the judge imposed a conditional discharge. There were very good reasons for that. But we dealt with the confiscation proceedings and we agreed to hand over £500 million plus interest. And we'd done all that, so we were down in the pub celebrating our fantastic success and cooperation. When somebody actually pointed out, because this was a pub that a lot of lawyers use, and somebody said, oh, I didn't know you could have a confiscation order on the back of a conditional discharge. And this was the first time we actually looked it up. And he's like, oh God, yeah, he's right. So we had to do a joint email to the judge who said, dear judge, it's been brought to our attention, we were very honest, we didn't say we'd spotted it. It's been brought to our attention that apparently you can't impose a confiscation order on the back of a conditional discharge, because technically a conditional discharge is not a conviction, and you can only impose confiscation proceedings when somebody's been convicted. So we just did a joint email saying, look, we don't expect you to drag us all into court about this. You've been very nice. We will accept whatever nominal penalty you care to impose. And we actually got an email back just going, okay, £1 fine then. But that's what the slip rule is there for. It's for these sort of technical errors. But the judge said, no, this isn't just a mistake. These proceedings were a nullity. They were brought in a basis that they could never have been brought. So go away. Basically, I'm declaring these were a nullity. The 6 cases that we've dealt with, that means they were, like I say, it's not wrongfully convicted, because, there's not a debate as to whether or not they actually were fare dodging. It's just that they were dealt with by a procedure that can't cope with that. But what's going to happen to the other 74,000 people? To say the quiet part out loud, they're probably just going to have to give them all the fines back. I mean, theoretically, I suppose they could try to charge them with the correct offence or something like that, but because there's this 6-month time limit on summary-only offences, which most of these are, they're probably all out of time now. So basically, the railway companies are going to be dipping into their pockets. What they've actually said is, they said, please don't contact us, we'll contact everybody ourselves. Whether or not people do that, I suspect a lot of people are going, oi, I want my £250 back or whatever they got fined. But this illustrates a problem, I think, with the single justice procedure. So what is the single justice procedure? Well, as the name suggests, it's a way of dealing with cases with a single justice, that is to say a single magistrate. And the way it works is they just stick a magistrate in a room somewhere at the court. Now originally they used to stick them in there with a legal advisor, but now they're just sticking them in a room with a telephone, and they're getting like one legal advisor per 4 magistrates. And what people have said is, well, the problem here is it's just speedy bulk justice, which isn't justice, because there are lots of horror stories where the way it works, if you are charged with an offence that can't attract imprisonment or anything like that, they'll give you a chance and say, we're happy, you know, this can be dealt with by way of the single justice procedure. And you fill out the form, and a lot of the time people plead guilty. Technically speaking, you can plead not guilty on a single justice procedure. If you do that, the magistrate might say, well, okay, this needs to go for a hearing then. But all this paperwork is then sent to this one magistrate. And part of the problem is, all they literally get is just a list of names and charges and offences. They don't get, if you put in a letter of mitigation or anything like that, it's just not being shown to the judge. And we've had stories where one old guy looking after his terminally ill wife, he was very, very old himself, and basically got done for not sawing his car. Because, you know, with everything else that was going on. There was another horrible case where there was a girl who lacked capacity. So she was under the care of the local authority, but they cancelled the direct debit for her TV licence. So she was prosecuted for not having a TV licence. And the council put the guilty plea in on her behalf. Now, arguably, that, you know, whether or not that is allowed, I mean, when people lack capacity, yes, you can appoint guardians, and in this case it was the local authority. But actually entering a guilty plea on somebody's behalf who didn't have capacity, if somebody doesn't have capacity, generally speaking, the court won't deal with them in that way. They'll just decide, you know, is this somebody who can instruct counsel, you know, lawyers, can understand the charges? If not, there might still be a hearing to determine whether they committed the offence, if it was something very serious. With something like this, they'd almost certainly have discontinued or dropped it. But these are the horror stories. There's a really good guy, Tristan Kirk, one of the last of the legit, genuine court reporters, works for the Evening Standard, and he's done some remarkable work in bringing all this to light. Now, it's fair to say the magistrates themselves aren't very happy with this system. They have pointed out that it causes all sorts of problems. Somebody worked out that they timed a magistrate going down a list of cases, and they worked out they'd spent 43 seconds per case, because they'll just get like a big list saying, here's 100 people up for, you know, no MOT, here's 100 people up for no tax, no insurance, here's 100 people up for fare dodging, whatever. They don't look at, you know, theoretically you're putting a means form, you know, what's your income, what are your outgoings, but they're just not looking at that. They're just basically going, right, okay, everybody gets 250 quid fine plus costs, or everybody gets 500 quid fine plus costs. So that's the issue. I mean, don't get me wrong, the idea of doing this was, a lot of the time people are happy to go, yep, okay, I plead guilty, but it'll cost me more in diesel to drive to the court, so I'm happy for it to be dealt with on the papers. And the good thing is, it means that you don't have to list loads of hearings for people who might not turn up. You can just deal with them when you get time, you know, because that's one of the issues, you see. They'll just go off, they're not listed for any particular day, they just give each magistrate like a big file of papers and say, work your way through these. But of course there's a lack of transparency there. I mean, normally everything is dealt with in open court, and anybody can go in there and sit and watch what's happening, and journalists can go in there and report on what's happening. But, you know, when it's just somebody in a room and you don't even know what day they're going to do this and deal with all this, well, you know, that just can't happen. So one of the recommendations actually is that they should publicise when they are having these sittings, and they should allow at least journalists to just, you know, sit in and see what's happening. I mean, theoretically, they do actually publish all the decisions. You can go onto a government website and just pick a court and go down. It'll show what they dealt with, what the offence was, and what the outcome was. Although I have to say, when I've checked that, I mean, sometimes it's there, but sometimes it isn't. So it's not the most open and transparent system. So yeah, check out Tristan Kirk's stuff. Like I say, he's really good. And I've done a couple of other videos on the single justice procedure, mainly outlining just some of the individual terrible cases where they've got it wrong though. So I think pretty much here I've covered everything I actually wanted to discuss. So there you go. And if you are one of these people who got fined, keep an eye out in the post for when your cheque arrives. Right. As always, hope you found that vaguely useful, vaguely informative, vaguely interesting, etc, etc. If you did, please consider subscribing to Dan's channel. Try and get him to 1 million subscribers. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm really chuffed that people are actually subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate it when you do. Also, apparently I've got some members. Some of you actually signed up and donating money. I mean, look, I don't want to sound ungrateful, that's really kind of you, but I just enjoy being out rambling in every sense of the word. So, you know, feel free, you're under no obligation. You know, you have to sit through all the adverts, that's enough as far as I'm concerned. But thank you anyway, kind people. And also, thank you for all your lovely comments, because that sort of gives me ideas for videos. Where am I today? Well, I thought it'd be appropriate to be on an old railway line, because I was talking about trains. This is what we now call the Bissau Trail, but this bit used to be the Redruth and Chasewater Railway, even though it never actually made it to Chasewater. It doesn't actually go that close to Redruth either. But it was built, it's a private thing, it was built to take tin from the Great Flat Lode, where all the tin mines were, down to a port called Devon, where they shipped it to Wales. Also, just by way of diversion, I'm now actually literally walking through the middle of a stone circle, so I'll give you a little look at that. So there's one of the stones. There's another one of the stones. There's a stone in there. And you will see some more stones here. I mean, I do love me a stone circle. And I can give you a bit of the history of this one, because this one dates back all the way to 2001. Because it was actually like a bit of a millennial project that the council did. Oops, just bring that back there. But I do like it. But yeah, this railway line, there's a place in the middle of Cornwall called the Great Flat Lode, because there's loads of tin near the surface and it's all flat, so it's really easy to mine. And the Bassett family, the people I've mentioned before, you know, they got that big thing on Cambrai, they built a railway line, well actually a tramway, up to a place called Portreath on the north coast, where they would ship all the tin ore to Wales, and the ships coming back would bring all the coal for all the steam engines. Because at the time, there's a thing under here called the Great Adit, which is 40 miles of like tunnels just to drain the mines. It's the one thing all the mine operators cooperated on, because obviously if your next door neighbour's mine floods, it's not very good for you either. So that was actually one thing they cooperated. And at its height, that used more steam engines than the rest of Europe and the Americas put together. But anyway, so the Bassetts built their tramway up to Portreath, and all the other miners said, hey, can we use your fancy railway to get our tin up there? And he said, yeah, of course you can, but then like charge them a small fortune to do it. So they went, well, that's not really viable. So they went, we'll go away and build our own railway then. And they did. And unlike the one that goes to the north coast, which was all horse-drawn, this one actually had proper steam engines on it. It had 3 steam engines, Miner, Smelter and Spitfire. If you go to Devon now, which is a really nice little village, where there's a pub I really like, the community hall is actually the old engine sheds, which once you know that, it's really obvious. But what they've done now is they have linked up the 2 railways, the one that went north and one that went south, and this is now called the Bissau Trail, which is popular with cyclists, dog walkers, horsey people, and people who just ramble inanely on YouTube. And I've got something else to show you in a bit, but I've mistimed it. I was hoping to come around this corner and you'd be able to see it, but I think I'm just going to edit it. Oh, I did actually have some more trivia for you. I'm currently walking along the side of the Carnan River, and the Carnan River is where they got the gold for the Nebra sky disc. You know, that thing that's now, I think it's in Austria or Switzerland or somewhere like that. I always get those mixed up. But they've actually traced exactly where they got the gold from, and it's just like literally outside that pub I like. So next time I'm down the pub, I'll do some footage there and go, hey, here's a little bit of the river where the gold's from. And we're going to cross the river now, and if I can avoid like getting in the way of the cyclists, I will show you. It used to be the UK's most contaminated river because of all the mining stuff, but now they've planted loads of plants that absorb all the toxic metals, and you do actually see quite a few fish and things in here, which is very reassuring. But there you go. And some more things I can ramble about, because I started out, you probably said that viaduct, and that's the main line. So that crosses this little line, but that's actually the main line from London to Penzance. But it's a great example of one of Cornwall's many double viaducts, because when Brunel built this railway, Cornwall's like covered in lots of valleys and things. So why is that doing that? Excuse me 1 second. Yeah, that's better. Cornwall's got lots of valleys, so you need lots of viaducts. But they needed to get them up really, really quickly. So even though Brunel said, well, look, you know, trains are going to get bigger and heavier, so we need to make very strong viaducts. They said, well, no, just get something up for now. So they're sort of part wood, part stone, but then the top bit was just like wood. And then, as predicted, when trains got bigger and heavier, they did actually have to build new viaducts next to them. But one thing, I'll put some B-roll over it, you can see how much wider they used to be back in the old days, because the original trains were on a 8 foot 1/4 inch gauge, as opposed to that 4 foot 8 1/4 inch gauge that modern trains use. So if we'd have stuck with Brunel, we could have like 500 mile an hour trains now, you know, like the Shinkansen in Japan and TVR and things. But there you go. You know, it was all to keep the shareholders happy. Yay, and we finally got to the bit that I was hoping to actually end on if I'd have timed this better, but as you know, I don't practice these or rehearse them or script them or anything. So I'm just amazed we got even vaguely near this place. But this is the remains of an old arsenic works, actually closed down, ran all the way up until World War II. But arsenic is a byproduct of tin mining. I mean, that's one of the reasons there's all the actual contamination around here. But yeah, so you know, I just like it. It's just quite a nice chimney. Not particularly exciting, I suppose, but you know, a bit of Cornish history for you. And now I'll just try and get some nice footage through one of the plants to use as a thumbnail or something. I'll try and be artistic.